Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Gogogu Natural Processed Ethiopia from Bonanza Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Bonanza, based out of Berlin, Germany, and this is their second ever appearance on this channel, having previously reviewed the El Carmen, a wash-processed Colombian coffee. And when reviewing a new roaster for the first time, I typically like to check out one of their washed and one of their non-washed offerings, with this Ethiopia acting as their non-washed representative. So we will see how this one turned out, as this right here is day 37. And recipe we went with for this coffee was our standard recipe, a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 96 degrees Celsius, about 205 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the V60, which indicates a more medium fine grind. Roast profile for this one is reminiscent to our previous experience with Bonanza, which is to say that it came out a fair bit more developed than expected going into it. And I feel like a lot of people would attribute this one to being on the more developed side of a medium light in terms of the roast profile, especially relative to a lot of its other German contemporaries. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 15, first impression, and we opted for the V60 as it came out classically natural Ethiopian-like, with a very strong blueberry aspect to the cup, complemented by a slightly heavy chocolate component. And one thing I did find really interesting about this coffee is that they don't have any sort of berry note listed on here. I do believe that they have a stone fruit note listed, which I can see, and it's something we're going to experience a little bit more throughout this video, but from this first impression, I couldn't help but take the feeling that this was classically natural Ethiopian with so many of those blueberry characteristics to it. Again, slightly more developed than expected, but it is a bit more of a focused cup, at least relative to the El Carmen. So mixed first impressions, but we continue on to day 17 as we opted for the Chemex, and it initially did start out slightly fermenty, but did cool down quick into a much more fresh fruit sense. The slightly heavy chocolate is present yet again, though there is a slight cinnamon quality to complement that, with the berries and stone fruit being much more present in a slightly more developed profile. Once again, that seemed to be one of the more notable takeaways, is that these coffees were just more developed than expected going into them, and I think that played a huge role in my first couple of impressions of these coffees. We continue on to day 20, and we ran it through the April brewer. And there were mixed feelings from this brew method, as it was offering an abundance of fresh fruit qualities, but at the same time it was a little bit more boozy in terms of the fermentiness of this cup, and it felt reminiscent a little bit of rum for me, so that wasn't necessarily a trade-off I was enjoying. At the same time, the blueberry aspects were a little bit more of this blueberry nectar-like quality, as well as a peachy quality, with it being the most vibrant fruit aspects today. So I didn't necessarily know how I felt about that, as the somewhat boozy quality to it really did seem to take away some of the more enjoyable components of this one. Day 23, lowered the temperatures back through the V60, and once again I had mixed feelings on this coffee, as it wasn't an overly heavy cup now, but the fruit vibrancy was definitely much more muted, as it felt a little bit more lavender-like, as the darker floral herbality and strong purple characteristics really seemed to dominate the cup. So this one was decent, but not necessarily a trade-off I was looking for. I was really trying to accentuate maybe more of those fresh fruit components while dialing back some of the more heavier qualities to it. Day 25, same adjustments to the Chemex, and the same issue with the Chemex, as this cup felt a little bit too muted. Pretty tame in general, as the blueberry aspect is significantly more dialed back. Robust characteristics still present, with a slight floral component to it. So just okay. And it's at this moment I was at a crossroad where I said, once again, just like with the El Carmen, do I want to go back to the way that the coffee was, which was a little bit too smoky, but at the same time I was getting a lot of fruit qualities, or do I want to keep it this way where the entire cup just seems to be a lot more tame? And I said, you know what, even though I'm trying to accentuate those fruit qualities, I need those back. So on day 28, things came full circle as we adjusted back to our standard recipe, and noted the trade-off, as the blueberry aspect is definitely worth the more developed smoky qualities of the cup, as it's very berry forward. Sweet and vibrant, robust chocolate, sugar aspects yet again, so much more positive on this day. Day 30 back through the V60, and it's the best it's been up to this point. It's at its best just off of brew, as it seems to offer a little bit more of those blueberry forward components with a nice caramelized sweet aspect to it as well. Traces of peach, coconut, and chocolate all encompassed by this heavier bodied smoky cup. It does not cool down overly well, as it seems to lose a lot of its vibrant berries in place of this slightly less defined brightness. High purple florals yet again, so kind of mixed on that today. Day 34, final notes we have, same recipe. The cup is a little bit more heavy in general. Same experience here on day 37 is that this coffee just seems to be a little bit more heavier with the robust and smoky chocolate characteristics present yet again. Less of the defined blueberry and a little bit less clean. So not ideal. This coffee has been a little bit of a roller coaster, and here on this day, it still seems to be struggling a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And this one has a lot more level 4, so let's go through those real quick. And we'll actually start with the body level 4, because I did mention in the El Carmen review that we made these tasting wheels side by side, and I was really surprised to see just how high the body scored for this coffee, at least relative to the El Carmen. But this one had a fair bit more body and texture to it, even compared to some of the other coffees I'm drinking at the time. So that scored very high. Don't necessarily know what to make of that, but this one felt a lot more full-bodied of a cup of coffee in general. Finish, level 4. You know, that's actually a good thing. As I always say, if you're going to score a level 5 for a natural, then that does insinuate that it was a little too heavy and overbearing, but this one did score on the higher side of level 4. It definitely had a bit of a smoky and slightly heavy finish to it. Sweetness, level 4. Yes, once again, at least it didn't reach that level 5 mark where it's in the overbearing and too heavy sense. This one also did score on the higher side of that level 4, so make of that what you will. Really nice fruit sweetness. That's one of the better qualities of this one. Acidity, level 4, and that's now twice with these Bonanza coffees that they've come out a little bit more bright and acidic than I might have expected going into them, especially given the roast profile of them, but this one just seems to offer a lot of brightness in general, so that's one of the more interesting qualities of it. Berry fruit, level 4, and as I mentioned in our first day's worth of notes, I was really surprised that there wasn't a berry note listed on here. As for me, it was very clean as day, or I should say clear as day, that there was a very blueberry forward component to it, a lot of those classic natural Ethiopian characteristics in place of what they had listed as a stone fruit, which is notable enough to the point where it made it a level 3 on our tasting wheel. But even then, that felt like a more defined and strong fruit profile for me. Then we have a bunch of level 3s. We'll start with the cleanliness, level 3. That's not necessarily bad. I really kind of waffled back and forth whether or not this should score any lower. But as far as natural processed coffees go, I do have to say that this one felt on the slightly more clean side of things. And even with it being a slightly more smoky cup, it still seems to offer a very defined blueberry profile to it. So I'm happy with that being there at that level 3. That's one of the other nice takeaways I do have from this one. Florality, level 3. That's another thing I'd mentioned a fair bit throughout this review is the darker, vibrant purple floral aspects within this one. So that seems to oftentimes be in line with much more blueberry forward coffees. Citrus fruit, level 3, yes, and there was an interesting bright citric quality to this one throughout, and that's why I was able to score as high as it did, and it also contributed a little bit to the acidity, as well as the stone fruit being there at that level 3. There were times where it was much more pronounced and almost equally as pronounced as the blueberry aspect, so I could see that one on certain days maybe being a little higher, but 3 felt like the perfect place to put it. Chocolate, level 3, yes, and slightly more heavy chocolate qualities to it. And I'm going to take a very quick look at the notes because I'm kind of thinking back, milk chocolate. Okay, there you go. That makes a lot of sense. But a lot of the time with these with these natural processed coffees, you can experience a slight bit more of those. We'll just call them heavier characteristics, that chocolate, of course. Caramel, level 3. Yes, and this one did have a nice caramelized sweetness right off of brew. That's another really positive thing I wanted to take away from this one, as there were some nice qualities to it in general, and that's another one of them. Smokiness, though, level 3, and once again, that is attributed to a slightly more developed profile to it, and that's not necessarily going to be a great selling point to me, as in an ideal world, I actually have the smokiness at the level 1. It's not something that I typically seek out in coffee, so having it score that high isn't ideal for me. But taking a look at this tasting wheel, I do think that it's a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I did like it better than the El Carmen, but it suffers from a lot of the same things that made me not enjoy that coffee too much. That, of course, being the more developed profile to it. It typically isn't my type of coffee to begin with, so A lot of these things scoring in the manner that they did isn't particularly ideal for me, but at least it did offer some more of the things that I do enjoy, some better sweetness as well as some strong fruit components to it, even if the florals weren't necessarily in the direction I was seeking, and even if the clarity wasn't necessarily in the direction I was seeking, though both of which were higher than I probably expected going into this one. Those things I will take as positives as well, which is why I did enjoy this coffee a fair bit more than the El Carmen. This one just seemed to be a little bit more tricky, a little bit more of a struggle to get right, though when I was able to get this coffee right, there were times I was really enjoying it, especially that immediately post-brew sort of first sip to it. That was a really promising and enjoyable experience, but this one isn't going to fall anywhere particularly high as far as natural processed coffees I've reviewed this year has gone. I just don't necessarily think Bonanza is the type of roaster that I typically enjoy. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, though, I'm going to first point you in the direction of your natural blueberry lovers, because this one right here, I wouldn't necessarily say it's that classic blueberry bomb, though it did have a very strong abundance of those more fresh fruit blueberry aspects from time to time. That, of course, must be taken into account with the roast profile of this one, because it will offer you some more of those smoky qualities as well as those heavier qualities. But even then, it did offer some great sweetness and a very strong profile in general. So if you kind of marry all of those things together, then I feel like this might be a pretty nice fit for you. But for the most part, I think this is the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Gogogu Natural Processed Ethiopia from Bonanza Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.